Since the beginning of time, people have gotten their clothes wet. But in this day and age, we have the power to change that. So our Group 4 project is going to dive in and explore the possibilities of a hydrophobic t-shirt.
So for our Group 4 experiment, we used hydrophobicity to test the water repellent natures of different substances. So we were trying to test which one was the most hydrophobic, so when the water hit the surface of our clothing material, it would bead up and keep the clothing dry. Some substances might have made the clothing hydrophilic, so the water would seep into the clothing and get it wet.
Okay, so our experiment is to test hydrophobic substances on clothing. So something is hydrophobic due to polarity. So something is polar when there is a huge difference in electronegativity, and something is nonpolar when the difference in electronegativity is smaller. So something would be hydrophobic if the water, which is polar, is repelled by a non-polar substance on the shirt, and then it would be hydrophilic if they were both polar.
There are multiple ways to see how waterproof something is. One of them, which you can see how long water will stay on top of an object before seeping through, or you can measure the contact angle and see the angle at which water will run off. Waterproof, specifically extremely waterproof substances, have contact angles at 150 degrees where the water is sitting on top of the interface of the clothing. When you move the clothing up at around a 10-degree angle, water typically runs off really easily, and that's seen through super hydrophobic materials. Materials where they are not very waterproof have a contact angle of around 90 degrees, and obviously, since they're not waterproof, the water really won't run off at any angle. So as you see, the water went straight through the shirt, and that obviously means that the antiperspirant is not waterproof. This could be for multiple of obvious reasons. Maybe there's space between the individual fabric strings allowing the water to go through, or just some of the chemical properties aren't repelling the water as it is made out to be.
Okay, so the water dissolves fairly quickly through the shirt, and that is most likely because the Goo-Gone has polar properties, which allows the water to pass through.
This is spray-on antiperspirant, and as you can see, when the water hit it, it did not go straight through. It is beaded up and bubbled in a certain degree, so it is not known yet how long this will hold the water, but for right now, the shirt is waterproof. Look at it!
As you can see, the water completely beads up, and that is because the beeswax has completely non-polar properties, and this will not allow the water to go through. But in some places where the beeswax is not covered on the shirt, the water like that, the water will be allowed to seep through.
Yeah, the beeswax doesn't cover the shirt entirely, so some of the places have little holes in the fabric shirt.
Where there's space between the fabric here, this is the cause of the water seeping through.
So with this shirt, we decided to melt the wax so that we'd get a more even coating across the entire shirt. So hopefully, using liquid wax and then letting it harden means that there's not going to be any cracks in the threads of the shirt, so it's completely coated. Okay, so these are our results. We have them numbered over here, 1 to 5. That's chronological order, and then we rank them 1 to 5 and how effective they were. So the first one we did was soybean oil and Goo-Gone. This is not very water repellent. However, you could definitely tell that something had been done to the fabric, but the water did absorb into the fabric pretty quickly. And we think this is because the Goo-Gone must have some polar properties to it, and so it not being completely non-polar meant that some of the water was going to get through because it was polar on polar.
For the second one, we did the spray-on antiperspirant deodorant. It was somewhat water repellent. It had a low, since it wasn't like super hydrophobic, it had a low contact angle, and this meant that the water didn't absorb in instantly into the shirt, but it did absorb in after a minute.
Tested was rub-on antiperspirant. This was in no way water repellent, and it was the worst of the 5 that we did. We believe this is because the antiperspirant deodorant that we were using did not have the ingredient that would cause it to be hydrophobic, and so the water seeped in immediately as if nothing had been applied to the shirt.
For the fourth one we tested, we used beeswax, but with this beeswax it was in a solid form, so we rubbed it onto the t-shirt. And it worked really well, except for the fact that since it was a solid, you can't get it into like you can't get it like completely on the shirt, so there were cracks that the water would seep through. But for the places that the water hit that had the beeswax on, it worked really well.
The heck, stop! Alright, so the 5th one we did, because the rub-on beeswax had some cracks and the water seeped through, we decided to melt some beeswax and pour it on the shirt directly. And this turned out to be very water repellent, just like the beeswax. However, unlike the rub-on beeswax, because it was poured on, there were no cracks, and so the water sat on top of the shirt for a very long time.
The problems we encountered in this experiment was with the solid beeswax. It was very chunky and it was very hard to apply to the shirt evenly. So when the water hit the shirt, it went through the cracks and it wasn't good testing. So to alleviate this problem, we melted the beeswax, and by doing that, it could be applied a lot more evenly, and it worked.
Another one of the main problems that we faced in the experiment was in general the practicality of the usage of these chemicals outside of the experimental environment. So for example, a lot of the chemically treated hydrophobic materials that we are using aren't really safe to have in contact with your skin throughout the whole day, so obviously there could be potential health hazard and side effects with that. Another thing was, back to the beeswax, is it's not really practical wearing on clothing. It really would depend on what your purpose and aim at the beeswax is, and that is something that we encountered in the experiment.